Hello all, and for this one, I guess this is kind of a follow-up to my Province People video, but it can stand on its own, like you don't have to just go there and watch it. But I do kind of like to interwoven all of my videos together, because I do see it kind of makes people kind of follow it down, and it is kind of easier to make really autistic ramble videos and kind of being able to cross-reference something without losing like totally everyone. And so I kind of had this discussion with one of my good sort of libertarian, I'm pretty sure leaning friends, it would be safe to say. And so I kind of wanted to lay out why I thought capitalism is an enemy to us on a geopolitical level, and why it's against our best interest to support it, and my own kind of line of reasoning, and why I kind of shied away from the very ideology that I think he's getting at. And so I think if I really wanted to be concise and short, I would say that financial capital and like kind of capitalism, the libertarian kind of breaks it into corporatism, which he kind of used like this corporate, he called it corporatist because I was talking about the parasitism of capitalism. So he said, oh, it's the corporatist. And I said that it's really more about the industry, the innovation, the creative aspect, or the idea, whatever it may be. That happens, and then capital kind of the financialization happens, and that's not to just like kind of abstract into labor and all that kind of stuff, and like trying to measure the utility of it. That's like part of the whole point, is to shy away from that, is because it's ultimately subjective, and you're not measuring quantities, so to say, and like how it could fix into a greater context for someone. You can't like measure the value of it just through these abstract pricing. And I think part of that is why we're at an ideological end with kind of these libertarians, is because I think a lot of people kind of on the libertarian side of things, and who try to argue for it for like a moral standpoint, kind of sees the goods of it. But I would obviously argue about how something like fossil fuels and the innovation of the industry, the kind of concrete actual resources, is ultimately like what shaped our condition of being able to be internet connected neats. And the internet was created from the military. Like what the fuck does Apple matter if you don't have the internet? Like what is Steve Jobs connecting to without the military creation of the internet? And you see with NASA, NASA's one of those big government programs that are still kind of respected by the American public, I think, even on like the kind of libertarian side of things. And I guess what I'm trying to really get at is the concept of like corporatism to like the libertarian. That that is ultimately all capitalism really is, because all these kind of like libertarian concepts of free markets and this freedom of choice and being able to decide like what the utility is down to like the individual. It it sounds like this kind of like way of assembling this kind of like hierarchy of competence, if you will, and you can ascend the social ladder and live the American dream. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing and that it doesn't happen. I think it does happen almost on kind of a regional level. Like, I think this, if you and I made a small business kind of locally, we would be competing with each other. And you kind of actually live that kind of free market, free choice. You're trying to innovate and create something new that people will actually enjoy and find interesting, and done in a way that's not intrusive. But as you kind of ascend, you don't take into the fact that agency comes with, as you ascend power, and lobbying happens. And so lobbying comes along, and that gives the incentive of the people who kind of ascended the ladder to be able to return their investments by stamping out their competitors. And it's obviously just agency. And so all of these kind of like justifications and think tanks, especially like there's the one famously near here with like the Koch brothers. And what are they ultimately arguing is kind of like against the American interest of like the American worker looking out for himself, and kind of returning back more to an isolation, more localized resource, like concrete, tangible scenario. And you have these like libertarian think tanks who come along and say, oh no, free trade is is the open path, and that's the path to prosperity, because we need to be open. And it kind of comes at it more of this like amoral, pragmatic utility to this expression of trying to like define like someone's hierarchy or someone's worth, like for man. And that's a way bigger game than just like capitalism, I think, that people don't really like brush up on enough for some reason. I don't think people just like get consumed with wanting like a new car, or new machine, or new material like substandard that kind of differentiates from someone else. That doesn't just, I don't think that's just a money, that's power. And so that's that differentiate of from the pack. And obviously all the things that could come for that, from mating and whatnot. We don't have to go off on a tangent about that. But yeah. And so another thing that like the capitalist structure does is just it just basically presupposes that it's going to be able to take our work and be able to create growth off of it. And that's pretty much all that it really has to offer. Is you invest in something with the idea that in the long term it's gonna pay off, because things are gonna continue to roll on, and you kind of just keep going on with these loans and loans, and it's just this never-ending debt. And that's why you get both political parties are able to kind of both talk about the deficit almost in tandem with each time they lose power on a federal level. And so yeah, I just kind of wanted to point out how in a kind of circular way, the libertarians kind of get it wrong, in my opinion, in that the agency of capitalism not wanting competition is circular, in that it's going to stop innovation. And so like it's got to stop what the very processes that it's supposed to present out to us in this hierarchy of competence, that's supposed to be like this the best way we can go about expressing it without devolving into just drug dealing chimps, I guess, is like kind of really what I kind of took it in as when I was a libertarian. And honestly, I guess that we can, now that we kind of laid that out, we can go more on the midwit mystic kind of thing. if you will. And I just think that this kind of goes into line with the problems that we see all around us that have just been going on videos lately when it comes to the commodification of like these experiences, and things like a pandemic that happened, and the exploitation of people's fears, whether it was how they assess risk to themselves personally or their family, and just the lack of rationale into all these decisions. And what did most people have to say for it is, I bought these stonks. I wish I would have bought toilet paper stonks, or I wish I would have gotten into crypto before Joe Biden got in. And it's just this kind of like wanting of plundering the chaos and misery of other people around you, other Americans around us. And I just always thought that that's lame, and why I couldn't really get along with a lot of the libertarian circles is because it's just kind of like takes it as kind of this amoral, well, there is this utility of choice, but I want to actually, and maybe there is something to that. Like I said, I want to be charitable, and there is no sense in trying to punch right, but because as I used to some extent that's not true, but as I'm getting older, it's like I can't waste my time forever just like trying to go at my friends and trying to get into these like big arguments or something. It wasn't an argument, but I'm just saying like a discussion or whatever. But I just kind of wanted to give my perspective on that. So in addition to kind of like some of the other stuff I've brushed up in past videos about, but when it comes to actually, sort of guiding your fellow libertarian friends, if you will, towards like not subscribing to a bunch of OnlyFans and accounts and devolving into just these like harsh attitudes and beliefs or lack of, it just kind of brushes itself away from it because it's someone's choice and it should just be respected. But I wish there was more times in my life personally that someone would have kind of like jerked me around and kind of took hold more and said, hey, like you really shouldn't fucking do that. And that's goes against the kind of free will kind of expression, if you will. And that's a whole different video about like the liberation that can come from that kind of that calling to actually like do something in a different kind of like way than just equilibrium, if you will. So I also wanted to kind of point out how even in kind of these like capitalist and libertarian sort of think tanks, they even point out how it's just kind of supposedly this like depth of knowledge, and most of the time what that really entails is you see something going on that usually it's somebody else's creativity or based off of someone else's ingenuity. It wasn't because you're just some individual just kind of like tapping into something. There's different creativity isn't just originality. Usually it's like a replication, or or there's just kind of this repetition to it. It pretty much ends near the same. And that's why you get like those these algorithms on YouTube with how it kind of goes down forever with these kind of you can just get caught up in like something like a libertarian tube or bread tube or something for days because there's so many channels, because it kind of all everyone's takes kind of go along the same lines of these kind of groups that we've all formed. And yeah, so the capitalists will even point out how, based off of someone else's innovation, we just kind of sweep in and invest and uh, you know kind of contemplate what will happen in the future and ultimately get into debt. Uh, but there is some, why is capitalism so dominant in a kind of like defended sense? Like, why did I used to defend it? Why is my friend defending it here? And I think that does kind of go back to that kind of like call of like, this is the best we can got to kind of express this hierarchy through these abstract concepts of like what my worth is through this technique. But it's totally coerced by this kind of corporate entity or scarecrow, if you will. But it's always that's that literally is capitalism, though. It is just financialization. It's kind of, how Marx would always just talk about labor theory and stuff like that. He called financial capital is fictitious capital, but fictitious capital is like the meta, if you will. It's where you can get your most return on your investment, with sacrificing, the least on your, future outcomes. And yeah, I wanted to point that out and kind of also point out too how, capitalism, this kind of boom period that's credited for the growth we have, like where would it be without fossil fuels? Like if we were living under a different system, if we were under monarchy, as someone like Hans Hopper would, kind of point out how monarchy was more of a base libertarianism than democracy. And so the idea that it really doesn't matter what the system, the abstract system, and the way we're processing these things are without the innovation, without industrialization, without the rise of the internet, with the military and these sort of techniques that have risen out of that, and the forms of communication. And yeah, so one of the other things too that we kind of brushed up on was what we agreed on in a direct message was how, we were kind of both talking about that Monroe Doctrine, that kind of isolationism, and I was trying to point out to him that, that's not just some classic liberal, concept that actually takes incredible motives from the state to set that up, and even kind of set up the line of reasoning to justify it politically, if you will. Because, a political justification, a think tank, if you will, it arises to complement, like, these situations that happen. These kind of guys are abstracting after, whatever chaos happened. We have to, that's how we, take these things in afterwards. So I think that's really important too. And so I think just to kind of wrap up and, pigeonhole the end of this for the kind of province people politics I'm talking about, this kind of regional like call, if you will, is to understand that, this kind of call for competence, this kind of will for techniques and innovation and, creation that we want out of like capitalism, it's a false path, and we're far better off probably trying to have the state mitigate that role for us. And yeah, I think, and understanding that it's not just from abstract reasoning and social justifications for why we actually like these things, but the state actually preserving these things, because global capital doesn't care about the American family. It doesn't care about tradition or any of these kind of myths or anything like that, other than, you know, just these to commodify. And yeah, thanks for watching the video, guys, and I'll see you for the next one. All good fun.